The Klaxian delegate peered at me over his empty plate at the opposite end of the table, the room filled with the delightful odor of fine cuisine and delicious drinks. Non-alcoholic and no nuts, of course, needed for him. The crab-like creature in front of me craned his eye stalks at everything around him. He seemed to enjoy his meal, despite initial reservations. Unsurprising. They always clean their plates. Human food is very delectable. "Tell me something," he said, craning his eyes at me. "Certainly," I replied simply. "I have noticed things about the galaxy at large. Perhaps you can enlighten me," he said, looking at various adornments on the walls. "Please do ask. We have already taken care of business. It's time for relaxation." I waved a hand, and my waiter, a large, burly, lizard-like creature, took my empty plate away. "Why are these human creatures everywhere? Why do they control seemingly everything?" he asked. "Hey-ha, they always ask this one," I said loudly with a smile. "Pardon?" He looked offended. "Newcomers always ask why humans control everything. It can all be boiled down to one factor in their history. That's why they have all the ships. It's why they have all the planets. It's why they make all the laws. It's because of one simple thing," I said and smiled. "And that is, they didn't get the memo," I replied with a chuckle. He looked at me, bewildered. Allow me to indulge your curiosity with a history lesson. It's been about 100 cycles since humanity came to the galactic stage," I said. He nearly fell out of his chair. "What? That is impossible. They have massive navies and control almost every world. How did that happen in only a century?" "Simple. They never got the memo. Or at least, they decided to ignore it." "Do you know the basics of logistics in space travel?" I asked, carefully placing my blue hand on a datapad. "Of course! Do you have any idea how difficult it was to leave our home world?" "Exceedingly," he said, waving a claw. Indeed. The first thing any newcomer to the galaxy learns is that space is a lot worse than most people think. You quickly figure out that it just isn't worth it to try to build the huge megaships because there is no way to do it quickly or effectively or cheaply. It's a logistical and engineering nightmare just to get started," I said, looking at my datapad for references. "Yes, I know. We tried to see if we could try building a proper starship as soon as possible. It was a disaster. We couldn't harvest the asteroids in our star system until decades after we were properly established. We had to use rockets to ferry resources off the planet. As soon as we understood what kind of hell we were going into, we gave up and focused on smaller-scale pods and exploratory craft." He looked around him again, seemingly trying to avert my gaze out of shame. "I know. It was the same with us, faster than light. Travel became more and more of a pipe dream as we gained a greater understanding of the cosmos. The massive warship fleets became more and more impossible as we grew up, shall we say. The prospects of a galactic empire quickly faded into memory as we started constructing the only large starship we could justify making. Arcs. Large passenger liners full of cryogenics or stasis facilities for massive colonies on planets. I sighed with a fond smile. It took us nearly 400 cycles to finally create a decent engine to lessen flight times. Even then, we only colonized our innermost systems. FTL became a distant memory, he said with a somber tone. Humans, of course, didn't get the memo. They figured out a system that uses gravitational force to essentially fling themselves around the universe. It's a lot more complex than it sounds, and they have since figured out a way to do it artificially, but still, I said, gauging his reaction. He stared at me blankly. Humans have FTL? Of a sort, yes. Initially, the pipe dream of FTL travel dawned on them like it did most of us. Unlike us, however, they didn't take the hit like a hammer to the cranium. They refused to tolerate this and figured out how to use the gravity of their four gas giants as a sort of sling to fling themselves around. After they figured this out, their wormhole generators followed suit within a few decades. I said, using my data pad to display a schematic hologram for him. "They did what now?" he exclaimed in shock. Yes, FTL travel in the form of temporary, gravity-powered wormholes. Their FTL engines use an artificial gravity generator to create small rips in space-time to essentially teleport themselves around. It has its limitations, of course, but it works beautifully, I replied with a smirk. "By the matriarch," he said, still shocked. "It's the same for basically anyone. As far as we can tell from historical archives, it's always been the same until humans showed up. Before humans, all of civilization found this one hurdle too severe to overcome and simply just flowed with the river, so to speak." "See," I said, and helpfully displayed an archive page for him to read. We chatted a bit about galactic history, BH, or before humans. How the concept of FTL failed to take hold in almost every civilization in history. Empires covered thousands of worlds, but every world had its own governance, its own empire, its own territory. Even worlds in the same star system could develop vastly differently from each other, and wars between the same species were fought with hypermissiles or massive rockets. How entire civilizations wiped themselves out one way or another because they couldn't get off their planets, or they did, but killed each other because they couldn't communicate properly. The only civilizations that survived were those that understood the concept of unity, but also understood that when apart for long enough, people change. If these changes are not accepted, they are one step closer to extinction. Since communication still depended on distance, messages could take weeks to send and receive. Even as technology developed, the more an empire decided to try to build large warship fleets to dominate the galaxy, the more they understood that it was a logistical nightmare that wasn't worth the effort. Plans for conquest and cities built for industry collapsed or died out, because the problem of logistics kept rearing its ugly head. It could take months to assemble a fleet of even small size. By the time the fleet was ready, it would be sent to its death as its target would have time to build its own fleet, or as per usual, build enough defenses to swat it out of the sky effortlessly. Of course, many species realized the concept of the slip drive, where you could use a form of subspace drive to move quickly within systems. The slip drive used the radiation and gravitational force of the system's star to create passages in space-time, allowing FTL travel as long as you remained within the star's gravity well. But outside its influence, the slip drive is worthless. Almost every spacefaring species has at least some variant of the slip drive. Its biggest flaw is that it has a massive power draw, and even bigger radar signature, making surprise attacks impossible. Yes, I know this. Our slip drives are some of the best in the galaxy, he said boastfully. I laughed. So say they all. But humans got you beat. We had the same slip drives. We thought they were the pride of the galaxy. Then we landed a colony ship on a human world. Whatever pride we had disappeared when they sent their fleets. Okay, I get it. That still doesn't explain why humans run the galaxy. Do tell, he said, waving his claws in the air. Well, first, some human history. Humanity as a species has 4 gas giants in its home star system, I said simply. His eyes bulged out of their stalks. That's... wow. Most systems would be lucky to have even 1. They have 4. Yes, 4 of them. Within reasonably close proximity as well, all of them a different subtype. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. Technically, 2 gas giants and 2 ice giants. These planets are within reasonably close proximity to each other, creating their own secondary gravity well in the star system. Humans have figured out how to use these gravity wells to fling themselves around, sort of like a slingshot. I did my best to demonstrate with my arms, trying not to appear juvenile. Well, that's impressive. What kind of anomaly is their homeworld then? He asked. A death world. Hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, viruses, hostile native life forms, regular atmospheric shifts and polarity switches. A death world, full of death. And it's a world, I said. He looked visibly shocked, and I could hear his chitin chattering. Yes, isn't it? But apparently a death world is the best option for creating a species that succeeds. So, as I said, humanity is on top because they never got the memo. The memo that says no massive fleets because FTL no worky. Humanity is an oddball. I smirked, fully aware humans would be listening to this. So, how exactly do they control everything then? He asked. Well, in terms of our present situation, within that context, we just can't be bothered, I said, simply shrugging in response. Wait, what? We can't be bothered. Humanity came along and essentially showed us what was going on. We thought it was impossible to have massive warship fleets. Suddenly, humans show up with battle cruisers and assault carriers. We thought it impossible for large-scale mining operations. Humanity shows up and gives us a demonstration of their planet cracker mining ships. We think empires cannot exist across star systems because FTL communication does not exist. Here comes humanity. With the internet. I droned on for a bit. Okay then. I could tell he was getting bored. Right, sorry. I tend to babble. The thing is, humanity had accomplished everything we thought was fantasy. So when they invited us to join them, at no cost save to follow their rules, we saw no reason to argue. The more they spread, the more the galaxy realized, what's the point of fighting back? Their rules are reasonable, the laws properly enforced, their tech leagues above us. So all in all, we just went, meh, why not? And went with it. And here we are, humans, in effective, complete control of the galaxy. No wars, no violence, no death. They just did, I said. What exactly do you get in return? He asked, curious. Well, there is a grace period, of course, so they can test our ability to follow the rules. We join their navies, armies, and mining fleets. We do the same jobs they do. It's basically exactly how those old fantasy novels explained it to be. Eventually, we are allowed to build our own ships and add to the navy. Then, we are allowed to unite our disparate empires and go it our own, or simply stay with them. My species has simply decided to just stay with them. That's why I may not be human, but most, if not all of my people, call ourselves Terran. I rang a little bell and called for drinks. I see, he said, curiously looking at the terms of service contract. So, if I sign this, what will happen? Human warship fleets will appear in your home star system and any other colony you own. You will trade, you will sign up to learn. Then you will, under their supervision, learn to mine resources, all of which will belong to you. Then they will train engineers. Those engineers will then work as recruits in the Navy until a certain amount of time passes. Then they will be allowed to spread their knowledge to the rest of you. After a time, humanity will use its internet to connect your entire species together. Then you unify under their protection. And on, I explained calmly. It can't be that simple. It can't be, he said, his eye stalks straining. Oh, but it is, friend. It really, really is. We were surprised when they made the same offer. Now we have a fleet of our own, comfort, security, 24 star systems, and a booming economy. We are free to go alone at any point, as the contract states. We chose to stay. Some of us simply decide to join them entirely, and all become Terran. There are no catches or clauses, save for the terms to help in times of emergency, or sign up in times of war. Beyond the standard stuff you would expect. That's pretty much it, I said proudly. He looked at the terms closely, silent for several minutes, simply reading the contract. Yes, it is a difficult choice, isn't it? It's completely against nature that an empire that rules the galaxy allows itself so openly to recruit almost anyone within reason. It matters not what species, they will offer this to everyone. All you have to do is follow their rules, which are entirely reasonable. Most species would wholeheartedly agree with all of them. They are happy to make concessions for those you don't agree with, again within reason. There are absolutes they will fight you over, but they seem to have an unparalleled ability to reason with people, I explained. He looked at me, then back at the contract, then again at me, seemingly attempting to make sense of what reality was. He used a claw, reached behind him, and let out a yelp as he pinched himself. He looked around, shivering a bit. Then, without any further words, signed it and held up a glass of juice, in a toast. To the future. And a bright one it is, I replied in kind and downed my wine glass.